Good evening and welcome to Theater for Ideas. I'm Terry Doran. We're live here from the Allen County Public Library in Kikionga, Indiana. Used to be known as Fort Wayne, for those of you who might be confused. You might also know about a little bit about Mad Anthony Wayne, for whom this city is named. General Wayne had one claim to fame, and that was his ability and willingness to obliterate the culture and life of the American Indian. George Ewing, whom you just saw on our opening, made a fortune by selling the Indian out. During their time of trouble, during the removal time, Mr. Ewing was contracted by the government. Mr. Ewing, instead of providing the necessary supplies he was contracted to provide, kept the money, made a fortune, got a street named after him. And so welcome to What's in a Name? Let's Change Fort Wayne. I'd like to welcome as my guest, coming from Muncie, Mr. Ray White Jr., who is the chairman of the Miami Tribe, Miami Nation of Indians of Indiana. The Miamis once had a confederation and a settlement here in Fort Wayne. It was called Kikionga, therefore our idea of changing the name back to its original name, Kikionga. And Ray represents the proud history and the modern day Miami Indian. Ray, welcome to Theater for Ideas.
Thank you, Terry.
I know the Miamis are working on federal recognition. You want to tell us a little bit about federal recognition? I think that's important in terms of our topic because way back at the turn of the century, a little bit before that, you lost your recognition, meaning our government said you don't exist in effect. And you've been working, I know, for 10 years or more to get that back.
April 23rd, 1980 is when we started. November of 1897 is when the Miamis were administratively removed with a stroke of a pen from federal recognition. Right now we're in the final phases. In fact, I just talked to a couple of contractors that's working on our genealogy and our anthropology and our enrollment Monday, and they said everything looked real good. They're running a little bit behind right now on their contract work to have in, but they should have their final reports in by the 1st of January.
And you're supposed to hear here pretty quickly
March
now.
16th. March 16th.
That was postponed from February of this year, correct?
I'm sorry?
It was originally you were supposed to hear...
February the 28th, and then they asked for more time from the Interior Secretary, and 25 CFR stated that within a year of putting us on active consideration, they had 12 months from that time, which was February the 28th until February the 28th of this last year. After that period of time, they could request from the Interior Secretary up to 180 days extension. That 180 days ran out September the 30th. So the branch of acknowledgement and the government is going to be at least 6 to 8 months out of compliance with their own guidelines and federal regulations.
So are you hopeful? So it looked good,
It looks real good at this time. In fact, September the 28th, we went to Washington, D.C. and sat down with the Undersecretary of the Interior, Frank Bracken, who is from Muncie, from Indiana. And we had a nice discussion. I had a nice talk. We had a few problems, and when I left Washington the day after that, they said there was no problems existed anymore. So.
Well, great. What will it mean to our state, to the Miamis, to receive federal recognition?
Federal recognition for the Miamis, once we get our health clinic, we get Indian Health Service established, it means up to $1,500 a year for each one of the tribal members in a 6-county service area. We have to designate a 6-county service area, which is Allen County, Huntington County, Wabash, Miami, Howard, and Grant. That's where today we still have 1,500 of our Miamis still living around the rivers, the Wabash, the Massena Wall, the Eel River, the Salamone, our historic homeland.
and the Miamis, I think, mirror the Indians nationwide. I mean, the Indians are on the increase, but at the same time, I'm thinking of Pine Ridge, South Dakota, the reservations, the lowest life expectancy in the country, and I think that a lot of our people here are having similar kinds of problems because of the treatment over history. I mean, that jobs are needed, health care is needed, schools are needed.
Well, that's one of the reasons why that we want to reestablish our federal recognition, because of the benefits, not only health care, dental, eye care, and we're looking very strongly at this point at economic development in and around Fort Wayne. Hopefully our tribal office, our health clinic and everything will be in Peru on land donated by the city of Peru. Basically our social services will be located in Peru. Hopefully if everything goes right, a year from now we can have some construction started, economic development. The key to the whole thing is anytime that you have a high unemployment rate, you also have a high alcohol substance abuse, you have a high diabetic rate, and the common denominator really is economic development, being self-sufficient. Once you eliminate the unemployment, put the people to work, eliminate the idle time and everything, then you eliminate a lot of the alcohol, substance abuse, diabetic, and so it's...
It would also be a way of establishing identity as a tribe, as a people, as an Indian
hopefully
people.
We still got our identity.
But I mean of strengthening that identity, I should say.
Through economic development, and I have a nucleus right now of about 5 individuals, from an architect to a developer, real estate person, people that their expertise is in bonding, and that's something we'll be able to do is create like municipal bonds with government credit enhancement, AAA rating, 90% guaranteed loans. So there's a lot of incentive put out by the government to each one of the Indian tribes, not just the Miamis once we get federal recognition, but this is all the Indian tribes in the United States. If an Indian tribe today is not self-sufficient, and if they are not successful in business, then they better look at themselves real strong, because the government, the way the government feels about it, if they help an Indian tribe be economically sound, then that's a dollar that the government does not have to give them in the way of subsidies. Just about any program that you can think of. HUD Housing, Indian Housing out of Chicago told us that once we get federal recognition, they've got 50 units of housing for us. So there's like winterization programs, Project Safe, housing improvement, HIP, women infant care. So there's a lot of, just about any program that you can think of that the city of Fort Wayne administers to people in Allen County and the city of Fort Wayne, or any place in the state of Indiana, from welfare, ADC. Just about any program that our people would need is available to us once we get our federal recognition back.
Would there be a possibility, if you get federal recognition, for example, of that helping to create a culture center here in Kikianga?
Yeah, that's one of the things. We basically, the land that we have an option on right now, and we have had for a year, we basically got it laid out now on land usage, and of all things that are planned in that is some type of museum or a cultural center for the people that visit that land, or the businesses, or whatever we establish.
Yeah, because we've had, from our showing of Eagle Gun, had some ideas and meetings about a culture center, but we kind of held off to see what happened with your federal recognition, because obviously it should tie in with that.
Well, I've talked with Mayor Blair in Peru, and that's something that he and I have talked about with Circus City Days and Festival Days in Peru and such as that. Of course, the Miamis, I always give the Miamis and our ancestors the credit for Peru being there. It's not Circus City Days or anything like that, because the Godfroys and the Miami Indians, of course, that's the original reserve of my grandfather, Richardville. So I think the Miamis would take a little bit of credit as far as Peru goes, and the mayor's been overly generous with us, and I think he's willing to help us in any way, and I promise more or less that if they did put a circus museum in there, that any land that they donated to us for social services, health clinic, administration offices, or anything like that, we would build a museum or a cultural center. So.
Good. Well, and here in Fort Wayne, you know, the Miami Indians, your people, had the original settlement here, which was called Kikianga, here in the Lakeside Park area. So, strong history, and not only should be remembered, should be preserved and given tribute to. And right now in Fort Wayne, there's very little, if anything, that honors or pays tribute to the American Indian, which is the purpose of this program tonight. Talking about Anthony Wayne and Kikianga, let's see another one of our video inserts. This one begins with Chief Seattle's famous speech, or an excerpt from it, about where is the eagle gone, and ends with the footage from eagles at Lake Monroe. And in seeing this, might point out that a third bald eagle was just found shot to death in the last several weeks.
The rights too shall pass. Continue to contaminate your bed, and you will one night suffocate in your own waste. When the buffalo are all slaughtered, the wild horses all tamed, the secret corners of the forest heavy with the scent of many men, and the view of the ripe hills blotted by talking wires, where is the thicket? Gone. Where is the eagle? Gone.
A successful genocide program had been committed against Indian culture in Indiana. We also saw the successful genocide of the Indiana ecology. Same time Indians were gone from Indiana, we saw the loss of the black bear. We saw the loss of the gray wolf. We saw the loss of most bald eagle habitat. A whole list of species, elk, lynx. These went essentially at the same time, around the turn of the century, that we lost all viable and sustainable Indian culture in this state.
And a lot of this whole discussion seems to have to do with our attitudes and where our hearts are in the whole matter. But that's the same thing that is going to mean whether the eagles can survive in Indiana or not. The number one cause of mortality for all these bald eagles that we're releasing, as you can probably guess, is gunshot wounds.
The American Indian pulled back a curtain to reveal a vision, a spirit reflected in the silhouette of an eagle outlined against the misty waters there in the gray dusk of the breaking dawn, and its message seems clear: to learn the value of quiet and the beauty of all living things. Well, that brings up a point about the name change and manifest destiny and the way that we as white people, and I really should point out there's many wonderful, we have to generalize till it gets dangerous, because there's many wonderful non-Indian as well as Indians, and there's some Indian people that aren't so good either. So we're generalizing here, but the manifest destiny was the way that our country, was the philosophy we used to justify the removal of the Indian, the lack of federal recognition, and so forth. And manifest destiny said simply is that God Almighty ordained us to take this land, and anybody in our way, just get rid of them. And that attitude is now threatening the destruction of this planet, which is why I urge you to consider, if you're not going to actually vote to change the name of Fort Wayne to Kikianga, to think about what it means. It means of looking at our planet in a way differently than we have been up until now. So Ray, what else are the Miamis besides federal recognition? Do you have anything else in the works, or I mean, for example, do the Miamis put on powwows and things like that? That's something people always ask today, I mean.
We don't put on powwows, but we have a junior council that's very active. And the junior council has a traveling float, and they build a wickiup, and they assemble the wickiup on the flatbed trailer that they have, and they go around to about all, like Canal Days and Heritage Days, Circus City Days, Thorntown. They come here to Fort Wayne, to Three Rivers Festival. I almost lost it there. But they're very active. and it's something that we want to keep them active and keep the participation from the junior council, because these are the people that's going to be leading the Miamis in later years, and we want them to have the experience and exposure. But usually about all summer. They stay pretty busy about all summer from the 1st of June till the last of October.
Thanks. We have a phone call. Go ahead, please.
I was just wondering.
Still there?
Yes, I'm right here. I was just wondering what the changing the name of one city has to do with the whole environment of the world, saving it and stuff like that.
It represents value system, in my opinion. If anybody else has any answer to that, please join in. But we are told and taught, for example, of the Holocaust. This was a terrible thing and it should never happen again. And when we have memorial services to it, it's in the name of memory for something that horrible never to happen again. When you name a city after a man who did something similar to what the Nazis did to the Jews, then it's showing what your values are, in my opinion, and changing it to Kikianga would be to say that we no longer hold those values dear. Anybody else? Go ahead, please.
Never mind. I'll call back later.
Okay, thank you for that question. Anybody else that, you don't have to agree with what I say. This is a forum here. Yeah, hold on.
I just want to add, the name change would also be the most logical thing to do, because it would be in honor of a people who were here before the white man who established the fort. The Miamis established that village of Kikianga. So it just seems a good way to pay tribute. First.
Well, thank you. I think that this might be a good time to go back into history. We're honored here to have with us tonight from the old fort on videotape, Mr. Benjamin Franklin Stickley. Mr. Stickley is the Indian agent in 1816, and he's going to answer that caller's question and tell you in his words why he thinks this city should be named Fort Wayne. This is by Todd Allen, Allen County News, at the old fort here in Fort Wayne, Kikianga, excuse me.
Well, this is Todd Allen in front of Chief Little Turtle. Tonight's show, Todd Allen, Allen County News, that is, the discussion on tonight's program centers on the naming of Fort Wayne. Is it Fort Wayne, or should it be named Kikianga? Well, let's go back into the year 1816 and talk to the government, the agent for the United States government on Indian affairs. His name is Mr. Stickley, and I'll ask him a few questions, and Mr. Stickley will give me his view on this matter. Let's go back to that time in the historic Fort Wayne. Now, Mr. Stickney, I have a question to ask you, and this will be shown on a program that they say that the Fort Wayne should be called Kikianga.
The Blackberry Patch, or as some Miami call it also, the hair-cutting place. There's a little dispute of what Kikianga actually means. I've heard both said.
Okay.
But that's the Indian name for the place, the Three Rivers region where we stand now and where this fort has been built in order to overawe the Indians who were making war on the United States back in the 1790s and on up into the late war, our Second War of Independence. We're very concerned that the Miami in this region be loyal to the Americans and not to the British. And so our Indian agency here has had a tough job keeping the Indians on our side during the late conflict.
Now, go ahead.
We managed to keep them out of the Battle of Tippecanoe down on the Lower Wabash, and we managed to keep them out of the Battle of New Orleans as well. So I think we've been doing a pretty good job.
Okay. Well, so as a reporter, I have to ask you the question: do you think that this land really belongs to the Indian, or am I hearing that you're saying that the Indians were fighting with the British against the government of the United States?
Well, the British, in our view, were using the Indians to fight the government of the United States. They were exploiting the Indians for their own political ends. and the British have no more good intentions towards the Native American here than the French did. Now, the U.S. government has tried to take a fair position with the Indians by offering them cash money for their lands here, and in treaty arrangements made between the Indian leaders and the military and myself as the Indian agent, the Indian lands have been sold to the U.S. government. And every year we make a payment to the natives who live here in goods and in cash. The cash is used by the Indians to pay off their debts to the traders, and the goods are used here to make sure the Indians are well taken care of. Do not starve. They are well clothed and reasonably fed.
Okay, so that's from your viewpoint as a representative from the United States government. This gentleman is an agent with the U.S. government, and you can again go back to your debate about whether or not Fort Wayne should be actually called Kikiyanga, but this is the view of this particular gentleman who's an agent with the government.
There's a very strong reason why we call this place Fort Wayne. It was called Fort Wayne, of course, after the conqueror of the Indians of this region, Anthony Wayne, who defeated the Indians and then had his fort named, which wasn't this fort, but an earlier one built not too far from here, named after him on October 22nd, which was the anniversary of the defeat at the hands of the natives here, at the hands of Little Turtle, of General Josiah Harmer, who was a revolutionary general of some distinction. And his troops were beaten badly on the Maumee River by the natives gathered here and supported by the British. And on October 22nd, that was the Battle of Kikiyanga, as we've called it since. And it was necessary to put behind us the disgrace of that defeat by the U.S. infantry at the hands of the natives. It's the first time the U.S. infantry fought a battle since the Revolution, and they were defeated by the natives here. October 22nd is the day then we designated as a day to name, in the honor of the conqueror of those same Indians, this fort called Fort Wayne.
So in your position, or rather in your opinion, you think that we should keep the name Fort Wayne as it is?
Yes, very definitely.
Okay, and that's all that I have. This is Todd Allen reporting from Fort Wayne at the fort with an agent with the government, an Indian agent, Mr. Stickney.
Benjamin Franklin Stickney.
Sorry, Benjamin Franklin Stickney. That's all I have for this report. Thank you very much. Todd Allen reporting.
I'd like to thank Todd Allen for that report from the old fort, and Mr. Stickley for his comments, and that kind of gives you the view of the Fort Wayne side of the name.
I have a question for Ray.
Yes.
What's your opinion of that whole piece you just saw, Ray? You want my honest opinion, or you want me to just... Well, it goes back, and he said, which I think is erroneous, he said that the only thing the British did with the Miami Indians was to exploit them. If anybody done any exploiting, and he just said that they issued money to the Miami Indians to pay their bills with, and by the time they paid their bills to the fort and the traders and the people they bought the goods off of and everything, then they didn't have any money left. So you talk about getting into exploiting peoples or cultures or whatever it might be, I think they better go look at themselves in the mirror. And basically it's still going on today. It hasn't changed, and I run into that quite often. There's times that I go talk to city governments and county governments and individuals in the state of Indiana, and it's like rolling the clock back 150 years. So really it hadn't changed a lot.
We saw you give the thumbs up sign when you talked about General Harmer there.
Well, Harmer and St. Clair,
you know. This fall, 1990, will be the 200th anniversary of the last defeat of the American Army at the hands of the great Chief Little Turtle, and that's when we should have that culture center in memory of that event. We have a phone call. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was wondering, you know how you wanted to rename the city to Kikiyanga?
Yes, sir?
I was just curious, why not try calling it the Summit City?
We're not locked into Kikiyanga. We'll take Fort Weird. That was Nancy Null's idea. And the News Sentinel, or your idea of Summit City, that's a fine one too. I'd say anything but Anthony Wayne.
Little Turtle.
Little Turtle, Indiana.
All-American City?
Pardon?
The All-American City?
All-American City? Okay. I think we need to be a little more specific, but that We'll take that.
All right.
You're getting in the swing of it. Thank you very much.
All right. I kind of think Kikianga sucks.
Okay, thank you. You know, another thing I wanted to mention, and then we're going to get to some responses of letters that we received, is that back in 1909, Memorial Park was called Kikianga Golf Course. And this comes to me from tennis historian of Fort Wayne, Johnny Johnson. Johnny, thanks for the information. But Memorial Park used to be called Kikianga Golf Course. And I guess if Anthony Wayne did anything for civilization, it was taking Indians' land and making golf courses out of them. And thank you, Anthony, for that. I want to get to some responses here. Ray, we sent out a letter to, I don't know, all the city council members, the mayor of Kikianga, Indiana, the community leaders. We sent it to about 40 different clergy members here in the City of Churches, another name for Fort Wayne. And we sent it out nationally to all the networks and some of the magazines, and to Mr. Dan Quayle and Mr. George Bush. I'd like to share with you now all the, I'll read to you first just the last paragraph, the clergy. I said, Wendy Watson and I signed this letter, said, "We fail to understand how honoring individuals who made their fame and fortune destroying the American Indian is in any way paying tribute to the Indian, past or present, or how it does honor to our nation, state, or city. That is what we would like you to explain to us. You are looked up to as a leader, as an individual who provides moral and spiritual guidance. You preach against injustice and abuse of human rights. In fact, justice in its pursuit, as we understand it at least, is or should be the foundation of Christianity." I was wondering now if Mark, if you could show us the response from the clergy here in the City of Churches.
Yes, Terry, we have here page 1. This is the response we got from the clergy here in Fort Wayne.
Stunning, isn't it?
Let me show you what the mayor sent us here.
Oh!
This is correspondence from the mayor. I believe some of our state senators and representatives have this page
Senator
here.
Coates, Senator Lugar, Congresswoman Long, yes.
Right, yes, I believe, I can't see their names on there, but I believe those are the ones you mailed them off to. Yes. Some of the city council here, this is some of theirs, although we did get a letter from
This is 8 of the city council members' response, but we would like to, before we get to Mr. Henry, I want to give credit. Michael Hallfield called and said he could not make it. Let's see, Joe Weiler from the News Sentinel called and said he could not make it. He also said he's the editor of the News Sentinel, that he had no comment on the changing the name of Fort Wayne. And Chancellor Lance from IPFW called and said she couldn't make it. And Dan Quayle, Vice President of the United States, called, his office did, and said that he thanked me for the invitation, but his schedule would not allow him to attend. He had something in Washington tonight, but I give Mr. Quayle credit for calling. He also thanked me for a note I wrote in there where I reminded him that I interviewed him when he was running for Congress, and I said, but don't blame me for where you are now. Okay.
Well, this is a letter from Mr. Mike Henry. He was one of the few that
Tom Henry. Tom Henry. Yes.
That's all I have right now. The rest.
Well, thank you, Mark. Yes, thank you. Those were Mark Javart. Mark, thank you. Mr. Henry, in keeping with the spirit of tonight's program, is our city council member from the 3rd District here in Kikianga, Indiana, or Summit City, Indiana, or Fort Weird, Indiana, or anyway, you get the point. His schedule also would not allow him to attend tonight. But he wished us luck, and he said he's thought about this for several days now, the suggestion, and he's come up with 3 concerns relative to it. First, from a practical perspective, it is extremely difficult to change even a street name, much less a city. The numerous individuals, agencies, organizations, etc. that have to be notified and informed of the change is almost insurmountable. Today's world is shrinking, and as a result, the city of Fort Wayne is not only known to its own residents and the residents of Allen County and Indiana, but throughout the country and throughout the world. Again, notification and the proper changes from a practical perspective would be almost impossible. Secondly, from a financial perspective, if the city of Fort Wayne chose to change its name to anything other than its current signature, we ourselves would have to incur the expenses of that name change. The expenses involved in changing all the documents, deeds, maps, and other references would be an expense that would probably equal or exceed the budget of several of our major departments, possibly even the budget of our program. Finally, from a philosophical perspective, I understand your desire to eliminate references to General Wayne and to others in our community who are not perhaps the best examples of humanitarians or of positive progressive leaders. However, I'm not so sure that it's not good for us to retain current references to individuals of General Wayne's notoriety. When inquiries are made to Fort Wayne's namesake, it is possible, as you have done, to reflect on Mad Anthony Wayne's notorious deeds, as well as any other contributions he may have made. If we were to eliminate him from reference, then perhaps little would be said about the barbaric activities that took place during his tenure in this community. I believe it is important to have some references in our community to those who had a perhaps negative impact as well as a positive one, because it is from these references that we can reflect on our own human frailties and faults. So in closing, I would like to reiterate the fact that I support your creative thinking and your desire for recognition of the American Indian, particularly in this area. However, from a practical, financial, and perhaps philosophical basis, I am not so sure that this venture should succeed. May I make two suggestions relative to your desire for recognition of the American Indian in this area? First, perhaps a move could be made for a memorial in Fort Wayne to the American Indian, perhaps in conjunction with the old fort. Second, perhaps your group could work with the Historical Society and our Historical Museum in bringing the American Indian more to the forefront in our community. Signed, Thomas Henry, addressed to Wendy Watson and myself. Mr. Henry, if you're watching, thank you very much for that letter. I want to make some comments, but I'll take this phone call first. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I don't understand why you want to change the name to Kikianga, because I have great pride in the name of Fort Wayne, and I'm very proud to tell my friends and family where I live, and it's just a name that, I don't know, I've just kind of grown up with, and I would just feel so lost and empty if you change the name, and I just don't know. I mean, I don't understand why you're doing this, because, I mean, if it did get changed, I mean, all these little children you'd have to reteach, and all these people would get so confused, and the mail would get lost, and there'd be so many problems with this issue, and I just think it's completely ridiculous even considering to be changed the name of this proud city that we are part of, and I'm just happy to be a citizen here at Fort Wayne, and I just think you're completely insane for even thinking about changing the name.
Well, thank you for that comment. You're certainly welcome to your point of view. I think we could still feel proud about our city with the name Kikianga, or even Fort Weird, possibly. But anyway, I do appreciate that comment. Yes, we have a question back here.
The part of the name Fort Wayne that I object to is the fort part. Fort is a military institution. They go up there in their little turrets and they shoot out at anybody that comes past, and that's something that I'm not proud of, and I'd like to get rid of it. You know, you can get rid of Wayne too, but make sure you get rid of Fort.
Okay. Okay, well, Nancy, I'm sorry, we're going to have to do away with Fort Weird, maybe just keep the weird part. But at any rate, that's a good point, and in the press release we sent out, we said Fort Wayne is a military name, period. Certainly not one of peace and gentleness. We have another phone call? I heard the phone ringing, or not? No? Okay, go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm a Chippewa Indian, and I grew up on a Chippewa Indian reservation in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And I grew up listening to WoWo radio in Fort Wayne. And I always admired the radio station and Fort Wayne, the name Fort Wayne. And in 1966, I became a resident of Fort Wayne, and I've grown to love the city. It's become my home. I am no longer a Wolverine. I consider myself a Hoosier, and a proud Hoosier, and a Fort Wayne resident. And I guess that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let me make a comment.
Yeah,
I hope
and
he's-
thank you, Marion, for your comments. Very
I
good.
hope he's still proud of Mount Pleasant, Michigan, and Saginaw Chippewa Reservation that he made mention of that he's from. I've been there, I've visited the place, and know the tribal leaders and a number of the people up there. I hope that his allegiance is still with his reservation in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, too.
And again, we need to point out that in many ways we're generalizing, and that isn't to say there aren't many fine things about this city. But I personally, and I think some of the people in the room, agree that the name is not one of them. And if we can't change a name, as Mr. Henry, we thank him for sharing those insights about how difficult it would be from a practical and financial venture, then what about changing the name of Ewing Street, at least Ewing Street, and call that Little Turtle Street or something? Okay, another phone call. Go ahead, please.
Oh, this is David Marks. I'd just like to say I'm real proud of Ray and proud of you, and I just don't know what else to say, but Fort Wayne's all right. I'm from Peru, and I was raised in Fort Wayne, and I think Ray's doing a good job of what he's doing. That's all I've got to say.
Well, thank you so much.
One of my greatest supporters. He's on our council. He is Miami Indian.
Thank you. We think we'll go to our next video drop-in. We've been talking about Little Turtle and Anthony Wayne. This will show you a little bit about their relationship, and it will end with something I mentioned. If I didn't mention, I mention it now. The Potawatomi's removal by United States soldiers from their homeland in Plymouth, Indiana, to Kansas, marched at gunpoint all the way to Kansas. So if we could have this drop in, we'll see Little Turtle. Little Turtle grew up in the Fort Wayne area near Columbia City. And here we see why we wanted their land so badly. He went on as war chief of the Miami Confederation, which, by the way, featured a young lieutenant named Tecumseh, to hand decisive defeats to, among others, Colonel Harmer in 1790 in the Lakeside Park area of Fort Wayne, where the Miamis had their chief village called Kikianga, and to General St. Clair in 1791 on the Indiana-Ohio border. In 1794, General Anthony Wayne, better known to his friends as Mad, dashed the Indians' dreams at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, leading to the disastrous Greenville Treaty the following year, which saw the Indians sign away vast land in Indiana and Ohio. Wayne, who was sent here by a man named George Washington to clean up the Indian problem, praised the Miami's neatly cultivated fields, calling the corn the best corn he's ever torched. Little Turtle, by the way, did not participate in the Battle of Fallen Timbers, in part because he did not want to go into battle against his adopted son-in-law, William Wells, who fought for the Indians but switched to his native white and became a scout for Wayne. Little Turtle instead advocated peace and schooling and preached against the evils of alcohol. He said, "This liquor they introduce into our country is more to be feared than the tomahawk. More of us have died since the Treaty of Greenville than we lost by the years of war before, and it is all owing to the introduction of this liquor among us." Here we see a memo written by William Henry Harrison, a lieutenant in Wayne's army, issuing beef and whiskey to the Miami Indians. Little Turtle died in 1812 and is buried in Fort Wayne.
The problem of different ideas and spiritual ideas and concepts was noted very, very early in the accounts of traders who came out to this country, and they'd write back and say, "No, this is really amazing. These people manage to live together, and they have these towns, and they carry on, and they don't have any jails, and they don't have any law courts, and they don't have any insane asylums, and they don't have any orphanages. They manage to get everybody taken care of." And the idea of balance, of course, is the one thing that seems to be very basic in Indian society.
Tecumseh died in battle in Canada, a warrior to the end. Harrison died in office just shortly after his inauguration of pneumonia.
India, hey-ya, India, hey-oh, India, hey-oh, hey-ya.
The Cherokee's history is filled with the same sorrow as all Indian people.
They came to your chapel on a bright summer's day with bayonets in their rifles. They had little to say. They tied you with rope and they tied you with chains. Then they marched you like criminals across these hot plains. The nominee, the man who won't sign, won't give up his honor, put his land on the line. They cut down your garden, left hardly a trace of your beautiful soul or your beautiful race. 18,000 acres in 1837 for $18,000. A man they'd never seen. We called the white man holy and we called the red man savage. Then we burned down all his wigwams, subdivided all his dreams. The nominee, the man who won't sign, won't give up his honor, put his land on the line. They cut down your garden, left hardly a trace of your beautiful soul or your beautiful race.
Potawatomis were rounded up from church. They had converted to Catholicism at that time, and they were rounded up, so they could hardly have been called savages or heathens, one of the popular terms for Indians. I wanted to show that because it also showed the greatness of Indian people like Little Turtle and the great Tecumseh, who his adversary, William Henry Harrison, who became President of the United States, said that wonderfully moving, eloquent statement about Tecumseh. And the rendition of Tecumseh and Little Turtle was by a very talented local artist, Nancy Lutz. We also want to point out that a man in that trail of death, the removal of Colonel Tipton, you might be interested to know that West Central, what we now know as West Central Fort Wayne, the historic West Central, where I happen to live, that was deeded to Colonel Tipton by President Madison in 1820. That's 4 years after Mr. Stickley's comments. For his reward for removing the Indian, he was deeded 25.5 acres. It's now West Central. We still have the phone call? Go
Hello?
ahead, please. Go ahead.
Yes, Terry, this is Janet Bradbury. I want to thank you for the invitation. To be there tonight. I had every intention of attending, and I'm home with the flu this evening, but I am watching.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for the program, and I want to thank Councilman Henry for taking the time to write. He expressed many concerns that I share, but I do totally support your effort to keep us aware constantly of history, not as we'd like it to be, but as it really was. I'm a school teacher. We're studying Canada right now, and we're just today studying how the French and English exploited the Hurons and the Iroquois. And I think it's so important that we teach the facts that we were the savages and that we, of course, exploited the Native Americans. So while I do have some problems with changing the name, I think it is vitally important that we keep history real.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was Janet Bradbury. I was a member of our city council. Thank you very much. Very pleased with that. And I think Janet made a very important point. I think I mentioned during the show, and I'll say it again, that we're realistic. We know it'd be difficult. We know there'd be a lot of problems changing the name, but she hit on the main thing. Let's keep history truthful. You know, Rudyard Kipling said the first casualty of war is the truth. Another phone call? Go ahead, please. Lost the phone call. Okay, Ray, do you have anything you want to say at this point on some of the video or the comments made by some of our callers?
Well, I would just like to go along with what the lady that's on the city council. I think, you know, in all reality, we'll probably never get the name of Fort Wayne changed, but I don't think the Miamis of Indiana have ever asked for anything. I don't think there's anything that's unrealistic that we will ever ask for. We just ask that people help us keep our identity, and the Native American identity being that Indiana is named after the Indians, and Indiana means the land of the Indians. We got a town named after my grandfather. Howard County was at one time named Richardville County, and they changed it, Rushville, and it goes back to the monument that was erected at the Battle of the Massanutten. In essence, it says that our names are on your rivers and your streams, your towns. I just wonder what it would take once we get federal recognition. Nobody really wants to talk to the Miamis now. So in essence, I think that the cities and the towns and the states are exploiting us right now. If we had money, there would probably be a lot of phone calls. There would probably be people knocking on our door, and there'd be bankers, there'd be city councilmen and county commissioners and state government officials and such as that. If we were to go down here south of Fort Wayne and develop in 3 to 5 years and develop $60 million to $100 million in development, do you think that would open their eyes? Or if we wanted to sell tax-free revenue bonds, would the bankers come to us? Or if we had $100,000 or $1.25 million that the BIA gives us or the Indian Health Service gives us, you think the bankers would come? You know, I'm not a real fan of bankers anyway, because you have to go to them and prove to them you don't need the money, and they'll give it to you. And maybe someday that we'll have enough money that we can pay our own way, and hopefully we won't need the banks. Maybe they'll need us. So that's.
Thank you, Ray. It's beautifully stated. Beautifully stated. Phone call? Go ahead, please.
Yes. I kind of agree with Ray there, but I'm looking up to you for going out to change the name of Fort Wayne. That takes a lot of courage to get on TV and make that stand. I'm very proud of you. But as Little Turtle said, he wanted peace. That was his goal. And so I think that you should rename our city to Peace. Not only would it be a great name in honor of Little Turtle, but it would be a tourist attraction. It would be a monumental city named Peace. I mean, just think of all the things we could do with a city with a name like that. It would just be so beautiful, so wonderful.
Excuse me, ma'am, we're having trouble hearing you. Are you saying that we should change the name of Fort Wayne to Little Turtle?
No, to Peace. For Little Turtle. Change the name to Peace.
Oh.
Because Little Turtle wanted peace. So it would be in memory of Little Turtle to call it City Peace. It would bring tourists from around the country to go to Peace, Indiana. It would be monumental. It would just be a beautiful name, and it would be a beautiful city.
Well, thank you. You know, a reporter from WoWo interviewed me right before the show, and he asked me why I thought Kikianga was charming and special, and I wish I had thought to say because I think it means peace, and you said it for us. Thank you so much. Thank you. Anybody else with any comments? We have about 10 minutes left in the program here. If not, I'm going to go to our last video insert. This will show you another city council member, since we just heard from Mrs. Bradbury, Mr. Charles Redd, and my great friend Dancing Feather. Back to changing Ewing Street, Charles. You're a city councilman. Well, what can we do? What's our step? What's our procedure? That would be yeah, right. I know you have. I didn't tell you this before the show. I was afraid you wouldn't show up. So.
It depends on who it's going to benefit. But a very similar argument in my effort to change Lewis Street to Martin Luther King Street, we can expect a similar reaction from those people who make up the majority of any group. All it requires is a petition or a number of signatures or people stating an interest in changing a street name, and then to find a member of council I'll volunteer to introduce an ordinance that would bring about the change. There would be some study requirements on the traffic engineering department. Costs would be determined by changing the name of the street sign. The county commissioners, the highway departments, and those kinds of things have to be cleared. It's not difficult, but just a reminder to those who don't even pick Union Street, I guarantee you there will be someone in Fort Wayne, Allen County that would have a reason to keep Union Street.
I'd just like to make a comment that I agree with the gentleman that just spoke, but we are not, none of us talking here about the past, we're talking about present day. The desecration of the graves is present day. The prejudice against our faith and our practices is present day. The prejudices against the school system and children in school. There's a lady in this audience could not get her child admitted to a school because she's American Eskimo. The prejudices are not in the past, they're present day.
Thank you. We still have a phone call? Okay, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you want money for the show, or what is it you need?
Money for this show?
Yeah, did you need money for Turtle Rock?
Well, what we would like to do, sir, is we would definitely like to create a culture center here in Kikianga, Fort Wayne, Summit City.
Don't you think Fort Wayne is like a great name for the city, or do you want to like name it an Indian name?
Well, the purpose of our show is to try to point out that it's not a great name. No, I don't think it's a great name. I think it's a disgraceful name, in my opinion.
Yes, but I think Indians are just as savage as whites are, don't you?
The white side?
The whites are, because the Indians, fought, and they killed Colonel Custer.
Well, yes, but that was in self-defense. I mean, of course, if you're a white historian, then it just depends on your point of view. It's a war if we win it, but if the rare battle that the Indians win, then it's a massacre. But I appreciate your point of view, and I think, though, that we need to think about what it means. Okay, thank you. Ray, you wanted to share us with something for us?
Well, I think there's a topic of conversation in Fort Wayne at this point. In fact, I read it in the paper this morning about the nativity scene downtown, and I was quite upset about it. And in fact, it took me all day to get over it. And in the same paper, just ironic that I continued reading the paper, and there was another article in here. It's a pretty good sized article. It's Indian Christmas Story is Different, and it's about the American Indian nativity scene. It says, imagine the baby Jesus born, not in a stable, but in a broken down birch bark lodge, wrapped not in blankets, but a torn rabbit skin, and receiving gifts not of frankincense and myrrh, but of beaver pelts and furs. This is the way Father Jean de Brebeuf, the 17th century French Jesuit missionary to the Huron Indians, explained Christmas to his flock, said Susan Atherton, a music instructor at Ball State University. The Huron carol places the nativity in the moon of the winter time, sent angels to announce the birth of Christ to braves hunting in the woods. The song is taught to all Canadian school children. You'll learn it right from the beginning, said Atherton, a native of Ontario, Canada, and former grade school teacher. Atherton said the carol portrays the traditional wise men as chiefs from far, who bring fox and beaver pelts to the child, a child whose ring of glory is more beautiful than the earliest moon of wintertime. The Huron children of Forest Free, sons of Manitou, are exhorted to kneel before the Christ child to find peace and joy. The Episcopal hymnal used in the United States includes this song, but the Indian names have been changed, said Atherton. Brebeuf worked among the Hurons in Ontario region from 1626 to 29 and from 1633 to 49. He mastered the Huron language and was one of the first to put it into writing, according to Song of the Seagull, a song book by Robert Evans. In 1649, Brebeuf was captured and tortured to death by the Iroquois during a tribal war with the Hurons, according to Atherton. He was one of the first native North American martyrs and was canonized by the Roman Catholic Church in 1930. So it goes back, and one of the Supreme Court rulings was that maybe it was traditional. One of them ruled in favor of the nativity scene, one of them ruled against the nativity scene, but I think this is really what it's all about. You know, when they talk about back in the 1600s and the Native Americans having their own nativity scene and the wise men being great chiefs and such as that, you know, how can you deprive the children, my kids, my grandkids, and everybody's kids and grandkids the opportunity to see the nativity scene and let politics enter into it, and just a handful of people keep this from the city of Fort Wayne or any city in the United States today. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank you, Ray, for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank all the people who called in. Those of you who think we're silly or not very smart for wanting to change the name, I appreciate your comments. The main idea is to give some thought and express yourself. Isn't that the essence of what this nation stands for? You know, 48 years ago today, Ray reminded me, was what we've called the Day of Infamy. Pearl Harbor started a war with this country. We went over and fought to free the Jewish people and many others from oppression, and the Germans here in the Midwest, in the middle of this country, what we call the All-America City. We joined in that battle. And as I said earlier in the show, we joined in, and now we have tributes and memorials so that we may never forget. Why do so many people want to forget what we saw on the screen about the American Indian? Want to forget what Dancing Feather said, that it's not in the past, it's present day. I will say it again, we ignore the lesson of the American Indian at our own peril. I want to thank all of you for coming, especially Ray for coming from Muncie. Thank you. Of Cable Access Incorporated, the support group for our public access channel, Channel 10, right here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You know, I'm standing here in front of the old fort, and Fort Wayne was named after General Mad Anthony Wayne, whose main claim to fame was doing away with the Indians. He did this in the name of progress and civilization. This is civilization. That's why I believe in Deep Dish. On Deep Dish, you can tell the Indian side of the story.